I am Mrs. Brammer. I am one of your PTO co-presidents, and I am very honored today to be reading Chapter 10 from the Tale of Despereaux. The chapter is titled, Good Reasons. The entire mouse community, as instructed by the most very honored head mouse, had gathered behind the wall of the castle ballroom. The members of the Mouse Council sat atop 3 bricks, piled high, and spread out before them was every mouse, old and young, foolish and wise, who lived in the castle. They were all waiting for Despereaux. "Make way," said Furlough. "Here he is. I've got him. Make way." Furlough pushed through the crowd of mice. Despereaux clung to his brother's tail. "There he is," the mice whispered. "There he is. He's so small. They say he was born with his eyes open." Some of the mice pulled away from Despereaux in disgust, and others, thrill seekers, reached out to touch him with a whisker or a paw. The princess put a finger on him. They say he sat at the foot of a king. "It is simply not done," came the distinctive voice of Despereaux's Aunt Florence. Make way," shouted Furlough. "I have him right here. I have Despereaux Tilling, who has been called to sit with the Mouse Council." He led Despereaux to the front of the room. "Honored members of the Mouse Council," shouted Furlough, "I have brought you Despereaux Tilling, as you requested, to sit with you." He looked over his shoulder at Despereaux. "Let go of me," Furlough said. Despereaux dropped Furlough's tail. He looked up at the members of the Mouse Council. His father met his gaze and then shook his head and looked away. Despereaux turned and faced the sea of mice. "To the dungeon!" a voice cried out. "Straight to the dungeon with him." Despereaux's head, which had been full of such delightful phrases as happily ever after and lovely ears and I honor you, suddenly cleared. "Straight to the dungeon!" another voice shouted. "Enough," said the most very honored head mouse. "This trial will be conducted in an orderly fashion. We will act civilized." He cleared his throat. He said to Despereaux, "Son, turn and look at me." Despereaux turned. He looked up and into the head mouse's eyes. They were dark eyes, deep and sad and frightened. And looking into them, Despereaux's heart thudded once, twice. "Despereaux Tilling," said the headmaster. "Yes, sir," said Despereaux. "We, the 14 members of the Mouse Council, have discussed your behavior. First, we will give you a chance to defend yourself against these rumors of your egregious acts. Did you, or did you not, sit at the foot of the human king?" "I did," said Despereaux, "but I was listening to the music, sir. I was there to hear the song that the king was singing." "To hear the what?" "The song, sir. He was singing a song about the deep purple falling over sleepy garden walls." The head mouse shook his head. "Whatever you are talking about is beside the point. The question is this, and only this. Did you sit at the foot of the human king?" "I did, sir." The community of mice shifted their tails and paws and whiskers. They waited. "And did you allow the girl human, the princess, to touch you?" "Her name is P." "Never mind her name. Did you allow her to touch you?" "Yes, sir," said Despereaux. "I let her touch me. It felt good." A gasp rose from the assembled mice. Despereaux heard his mother's voice. "Mon Dieu! It is Not the end of the world. It was a touch. What of it? It is simply not done, came Aunt Florence's voice from the crowd. To the dungeon, said a mouse in the front row. Silence, roared the most very honored head mouse. Silence. He looked down at Despereaux. Do you, Despereaux Tilling, understand the sacred, never to be broken rules of conduct for being a mouse? Yes, sir, said Despereaux. I guess so, but did you break them? Yes, sir, said Despereaux. He raised his voice. But I broke the rules for good reasons, because of music and because of love. Love, said the head mouse. Oh, cripes, said Furlough. Here we go. I love her, sir, said Despereaux. We are not here to talk about love. This trial is not about love. This trial is about you being a mouse, shouted the most very honored head mouse from high atop the bricks, and not acting like one. Yes, sir, said Despereaux. I know. No, I don't think that you do know, and because you do not deny the charges, you must be punished. You are to be sent, as ancient Castle Mouse law decrees, to the dungeon. You are being sent to the rats. That's right, shouted a mouse in the crowd. That's the ticket. The dungeon? The rats? Despereaux's small heart sank all the way to the tip of his tail. There would be no light in the dungeon. No stained glass windows, no library, no books. There would be no Princess P. But first, said the most very honored head mouse, we will give you a chance to renounce your actions. We will allow you to go to the dungeon with a pure heart. Renounce? Repent. Say that you are sorry you sat at the foot of the human king. Say that you are sorry you allowed the human princess to touch you. Say that you regret these actions. Despereaux felt hot, and then cold, and then hot again. Renounce her? Renounce the princess? Mon Dieu, shouted his mother. Son, do not act the fool. Renounce, repent. What do you say, Despereaux Tilling? I say no, whispered Despereaux. What? Said the head mouse. No, said Despereaux, and this time he did not whisper the word. I am not sorry. I will not renounce my actions. I love her. I love the princess. There was a bellow of collective outrage. The whole of the mouse community surged toward Despereaux. The mouse seemed to become one angry body with hundreds of tails and thousands of whiskers and one huge hungry mouth, opening and closing and opening and closing, saying over and over and over again, to the dungeon, to the dungeon, to the dungeon. The words pounded through Despereaux's body with each beat of his heart. Very well, said the most very honored head mouse. You will die then with a black heart. Threadmaster, he called, bring out the thread. Despereaux marveled at his own bravery. He admired his own defiance. And then, reader, he fainted. Thank you so much for joining me for Chapter 10. I am so excited to read the rest of this book. It has been so thrilling so far. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Samantha. I'm a Dragon Ambassador at Anderson Middle School. Today I will be reading Chapter 11, The Threadmaster Cometh. When Despereaux came to, he heard the drum. His father was beating a rhythm that had much more boom and much less tat. Together, Lester and the drum produced an anonymous sound that went something like this. Boom, 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 tap. Boom, 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 tap. Make way for the thread, cried a mouse who was pushing a wooden spool of red thread through the crowd. Make way for the thread. Boom, 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 tap went the drum. To the dungeon, shouted the mice. Despereaux lay on his back, blinking his eyes. How he wondered, how had things gone so terribly wrong? Wasn't it a good thing to love? In the book was, love was a very good thing, because the knight loved the fair maiden. He was able to rescue her. They lived happily ever after. It said so in the book. They were the last words on the page, happily ever after. Despereaux was certain that he had read exactly those words time and time again. Lying on the floor with the drum beating, and the mice shouting, and the threadmaster calling out, "Make way, make way." Despereaux had a sudden chilling thought. Had some other mice eaten the words and spoke the truth? Did the knight and the fair maiden really not live happily ever after? Reader, do you believe that there is such a thing as happily ever after? Or like Despereaux, have you too begun to question the possibility of happy endings? Happily ever after, whispered Despereaux. Happily ever after, he said again as a spool of thread came to a stop beside him. The thread, the thread, the thread, murmured the mice. I'm sorry, the mouse behind the spool, but I have to ask you to stand up. I have to do my job. Despereaux got slowly to his feet. On your hind legs, please, said the threadmaster. It's the rules. Despereaux stood on his hind legs. Thank you, said the mouse. I appreciate it. While Despereaux watched, the threadmaster unwound a length of red thread from the spool and tied a loop. Just enough for the neck, murmured the mouse. No more, no less. That's what the last threadmaster taught me. Enough thread for the neck. He looked up at Despereaux and then back down at the loop of thread. And you, my friend, have a small neck. The threadmaster raised his arms and put them around Despereaux's neck. He leaned in close and Despereaux smelled celery. He could feel the threadmaster's breath in his ear as he worked at tightening the thread. Isn't she beautiful? The threadmaster whispered. What? Said Despereaux. Shh! Is the princess beautiful? The Princess P? Yes. She is lovely beyond all imagining, said Despereaux. Just right, the threadmaster said. He drew back. He nodded his head. A lovely princess just so, like a fairy tale. And you love her, as a knight loves a maiden. You love her with a courtly love, a love that's just based on bravery and courtesy, and honor and devotion, just so. How did you know that? Despereaux said. How do you know about fairy tales? Shh! The mouse leaned in close, and Despereaux smelled celery again, green and alive. Be brave, friend, whispered the threadmaster. Be brave for the princess. And he stepped back and turned and shouted. Fellow mice, the thread has been tied. The thread has been knotted. A roar of approval went from the crowd. Despereaux squared his shoulders. He had made a decision. He would do as the threadmaster had suggested. He would be brave for the princess. Even if, reader, could it be true? There was no such thing as happily ever after. I hope that you all enjoyed the Tale of Despereaux with me.
Hello, my name is Mrs. Woodley. I'm the APS teacher here at Anderson, and I'm excited to be reading to you today, Chapter 12, Adieu. The sound of the drum changed again. The final tat disappeared, and it became nothing but boom. Boom, boom, boom. Boom, boom, boom. Lester only used his tail, bringing it down with great force and seriousness upon the drum. The threadmaster retreated. The room full of mice fell silent, expectant, and waiting. And as Despereaux stood before them with the red thread around his neck, and the 14 members of the Mouse Council perched on the bricks above him, 2 burly mice came forward. Black pieces of cloth covered their heads, and there were slits for their eyes. "We," said the bigger of the 2 mice, "will escort you to the dungeon." "Despereaux!" Antoinette called out. "Oh, my Despereaux!" Despereaux looked into the crowd of mice and saw his mother. She was easy to spot. In honor of her youngest mouse being sent to the dungeon, she had put on a tremendous amount of makeup. Each of the hooded mice saw a paw on Despereaux's shoulder. "It's time," said the only one on the left with the first hood. Antoinette pushed her way through the crowd. "He is my son. I want to have a last word with my son," she said. Despereaux looked at his mother. He concentrated on standing before her without trembling. He concentrated on not being a disappointment. "Please," said Antoinette, "what will happen to him? What will happen to my baby?" "Ma'am," said the first hood, his voice was deep and slow, "you don't want to know." "I want to know. I want to know. He is my child, the child of my heart, the last of my mice babies." The hooded mice said nothing. "Tell me," said Antoinette. "The rats," said the first. "The rats," said the second. "Yes, yes, we, the rats. What of them?" "The rats. Well, eat him," said the second hood. "Oh," said Antoinette, "mon Dieu." At the thought of being eaten by rats, Despereaux forgot about being brave. He forgot about not being a disappointment. He felt himself heading into another faint. But his mother, who had an excellent sense of dramatic timing, beat him to it. She executed a beautiful, flawless swoon, landing right at Despereaux's feet. "Now you've done it," said the hood. "It doesn't matter," said the second. "Step over her. We have a job to do. Nobody's mother is going to stop us. To the dungeon." "To the dungeon," repeated the first hood. But his voice, so deep and certain a moment ago, now shook a tiny bit. He put a paw on Despereaux and tugged him forward, and the 2 hoods and Despereaux stepped over Antoinette. The crowd parted. The mice began to chant, "To the dungeon, to the dungeon, to the dungeon." The drumbeat continued, boom, 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 and Despereaux was led away. At the last moment, Antoinette came out of her faint and shouted one word to her child. That word, reader, was adieu. Do you know the definition of adieu? Don't bother with your dictionary. I will tell you. Adieu is the French word for farewell. Farewell is not the word that you would like to hear from your mother as you are being led to the dungeon by 2 oversized mice in black hoods. Words that you would like to hear are, "Take me instead. I will go to the dungeon in my son's place." There is a great deal of comfort in those words. But reader, there is no comfort in the word farewell, even if you say it in French. Farewell is a word that in any language is full of sorrow. It is a word that promises absolutely nothing.